My daughter screamed, "How dare you sell that villa without my permission?" I just smiled and handed her the truth. The only sound in the house was the whisper of paper, sealing and ending. I sealed the last document with care, pressing the flap shut until the glue held. It was done, the villa was sold. Grace Manor, the house my husband built, the one my daughter believed was her birthright, no longer belonged to our name. I had not told anyone yet, not because I was afraid, but because peace is something you prepare in silence. The front door burst open. Amanda's heels struck the marble like a drumbeat of fury. Behind her, Greg's polished shoes followed, heavy and certain. She threw a stack of papers onto the coffee table, her voice cutting through the air. "Are you completely insane, Mother? How dare you sell the villa without asking me?" Greg picked up the documents, adjusted his cufflinks, and smiled the way a lawyer does when he knows the outcome before the trial begins. "You know, Lillian, if you keep making rash decisions like this, a court might decide you're no longer fit to manage your own affairs. Power of attorney transfers easily once mental incompetence is established." Amanda crossed her arms, eyes burning. "Dad worked his whole life for this house. You think you can just erase him because you're bored? You've already ruined his legacy once when you made him quit his company. You killed his spirit, and now you're selling what's left of him." Their words hit like cold rain, but I had learned long ago that silence was stronger than shouting. I stood still, watching the two people who used to call me Mom speak of me as if I were a liability, a burden, a signature that needed to be controlled. I wondered, not for the first time, how love could sour so completely that it forgets the sound of gratitude. Amanda kept pacing. "What's next? You'll sell my inheritance to some charity? You think this house is yours alone?" She turned, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You are nothing without Dad. Do you even remember who built this?" Greg leaned closer, lowering his tone but not his contempt. "Let's be honest, Lillian. We can take this to court. One mental evaluation, one declaration of incapacity, and you'll have nothing to sign ever again. It's kinder if you just cooperate now." I smiled then, faintly. I looked at my daughter's face, the same eyes I once wiped tears from when she scraped her knee, the same lips that once called me a hero for baking her favorite cake. Now those lips twisted to call me useless. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I took a slow breath. "You've made yourselves very clear," I said. "You think I've lost my mind? Maybe you're right." I walked past Amanda, ignoring her muttered curse, and opened the drawer of the old mahogany desk. Inside, neatly wrapped in a ribbon, was an envelope sealed in red wax. The weight of it was small but final. I turned and placed it gently on the table between us. Amanda frowned. "What's that supposed to be? Another one of your sentimental letters?" I looked straight into her eyes, calm as the surface of the lake behind the house. "This," I said, tapping the envelope, "is called The Will You Never Read." Greg scoffed. "Is that supposed to scare us?" "No," I said softly. "It's supposed to remind you that there are things in this world you cannot take no matter how loud you shout." Amanda opened her mouth to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. For the first time in years, she seemed unsure. I picked up the envelope, brushed the dust from its edge, and slid it back into the drawer. "One day," I told them, "you'll see what it contains, but not today." The clock ticked once, loud in the silence that followed. I closed the drawer and smiled again, not at them, but at the thought that peace, like revenge, was best prepared in advance. 30 years ago, the house smelled of fresh paint and azaleas. I was 35, a high school literature teacher, and Henry Grace seemed proof that kindness returned its favor. Successful, admired, the town's businessman. We were the picture of balance. He built, I kept home. Then the chest pains came. Doctors warned him to rest. I begged. "Sell some shares," I said. "We need you more than money." He laughed, afraid of seeming old. The night he clutched his heart at the table, I held his teacup as he slipped away. At the funeral, whispers started. If she hadn't pushed him to stop, he'd be alive. His sister said it loud enough for Amanda, 15 at the time, to hear. Amanda's eyes hardened. "You made him stop, didn't you?" she asked. Grief hardened into belief. By year's end, she called me her, not Mom. When Henry's company collapsed under debts, I sold jewelry, savings, and the little land my parents left me to cover obligations. I told people insurance had paid. The truth was simpler. I would not let his name crumble. Amanda saw only our modest life and assumed failure. "If Dad were alive, we'd have everything," she snapped once, slamming her door. I could not shatter her image of him. Years shaped her into Henry's mirror, ambitious, polished, efficient. She married Greg, an accountant with a smile that looked like profit. "He understands success," she told me. When she treated the villa like hers, replacing portraits, calling it our estate, I kept silent. Words would not reach a heart that refused to listen. One evening I passed Amanda's half-open door and paused. Through the wood I heard the casual cruelty that had become ordinary. "When she dies," Amanda said to Greg, "we'll sell the villa. That money will fund my firm." Greg chuckled. "Let her live long enough to sign it over." The sentence landed like a cold stone. I leaned on the wallpaper, feeling its roughness under my palm. Tears did not come. There are none left after long winters of loss. I stood before Henry's portrait above the mantel. His eyes, once steady, now seemed to judge. "Henry," I whispered, "you built an empire and taught our daughter how to cherish its shine, not the people who made it." The house felt colder, as though it chose a side. A steadier thought took root, not fury or revenge, but resolve. If my daughter could turn love into entitlement, then I could turn silence into strategy. If she believed I owed her everything, she would soon learn she was wrong. I smoothed the dust from the frame and felt, for the first time in years, a small, bright ember of purpose. That ember did not roar. It mapped slow plans, careful meetings with Mr. Samuels, hidden copies, quiet signatures. I would not shout. I would move in the soft hours, where deals are made by lawyers. Let them think me frail. Let their hands greedily plan. Amanda arrived with pastries and poison disguised as sweetness. Her voice dripped honey, her smile all calculation. "Mom," she said softly, setting down the tray. "You're not getting any younger. What if something happens again, like last month? Greg and I just want to make sure you're safe." Greg followed, posture stiff and professional. "It's a standard form," he said smoothly. "Durable power of attorney. Totally normal in Georgia. It only activates if you're declared mentally unfit, just protection." "Protection," I repeated, tasting the lie. The title glared at me in bold. Durable power of attorney. Financial and medical decisions. No limits, no clauses. If I signed, my daughter would own everything: my house, my accounts, even my choices. Amanda smiled too brightly. "All you need to do is sign at the bottom. You trust me, right, Mom?" Trust. The same word that once cost me my husband. I forced a trembling smile. "Of course, dear. But my hands shake sometimes. Could I have a copy to practice first?" Her eyes flickered, suspicious but unsure. "Sure, Mom. Whatever makes you comfortable." When they left, the air felt heavy with the stench of deceit. I laid the two documents side by side, the practice copy and the real one, and took photos of every page. Then I hid the original beneath my old recipe books, where only I knew to look. That night, the ticking clock sounded like a countdown. At midnight, I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and drove to Elm Street to Mr. Samuels, my late husband Henry's old friend, a retired lawyer who never stopped believing in decency. He opened the door, surprised. "Lillian Grace," he said softly. "It's been years. What's wrong?" I met his gaze. "My daughter wants to take everything I have, not from need, from greed." He listened quietly as I explained the false concern, Greg's lawyerly tone, Amanda's manipulation. When I finished, he sighed. "I've seen this before," he said. Children who think inheritance means ownership. The only way to protect yourself is to move first. Rewrite your will. I don't want revenge, I said. I just want peace. And maybe a little justice. Samuels nodded slowly. Then we'll make 2 wills. One they'll find and one they'll never see. I frowned. 2? The first makes Amanda sole heir, let her think she's won. The second transfers everything to a charitable trust, the Grace Wing Foundation. It'll help women like you, teachers, widows, the forgotten. The name felt right, like a promise. If they want my house, I said, I'll give it Purpose instead. He smiled, proud. Good. But you must stay quiet. Let them believe you're weak. The more they underestimate you, the stronger you'll become. When I left, the night was sharp and clear. For the first time in years, I felt alive, not angry, but ready. Back home, I looked into the dark window at my reflection, the ghost of the woman I once was. You've been silent long enough, I whispered. Now let them talk while you act. And in that still house, I knew. Amanda's game had begun. But so had mine. The dining room was full of laughter that sounded like a celebration, not a farewell. Amanda played hostess, her smile polished to perfection. We've arranged for Mother to move to Sunny Garden, she announced sweetly. Private rooms, gardens, 24-hour care. She'll be safe and comfortable. Aunt Ruth sighed with false admiration. What a loving daughter, Greg added smoothly. It'll be easier for us to manage things for Mother's sake, of course. The words, for Mother's sake, echoed through the room. I sat quietly at the head of the table, watching them toast to my new chapter. Amanda lifted her glass, radiant, to peace. But what they wanted wasn't peace, it was freedom. Freedom from the weight of me, of responsibility, of conscience. After dessert, Amanda brought a folder, all polite efficiency. Just a formality, she said, to confirm the move and help us arrange the house. The page smelled faintly of printer ink and deceit. Trust me, Mother, she whispered. I did trust her, just not the way she thought. Mr. Samuels had warned me, let them feel their victory. So I smiled, steady and gracious, and signed the false copy he'd prepared. Amanda's eyes gleamed. Greg's hand landed proudly on her back. Now everything's arranged. They left with cheerful goodbyes and promises to make the transition easy. I listened to their voices fade, their plans already turning to profit and contractors. Then I went to my desk. Beneath the recipe cards lay the real papers, Samuels's true deed. The villa was no longer theirs to covet. It belonged to Sunny Garden Foundation to build the Lillian Grace Wing, a refuge for those who had no family left to betray them. I folded the papers into my bag, locked the drawer, and drove away through the quiet streets. For the first time, leaving home didn't feel like loss. It felt like liberation. Evelyn Marsh greeted me in the little glass lobby, her hair in a tight bun, her face the map of a woman who has learned both sorrow and steadiness. She took my hand as if she recognized an old friend of the town. Mrs. Grace, she said, a small lift of relief in her voice. This is such a surprise. We are honored you thought of us. I told her my story in the spare sentences you use when you are about to make something permanent. They intend to send me, I said. And if they think they can lock me away, then I will ensure the place wears my name. Evelyn's eyes widened. You mean, you want to endow a wing? She asked, hardly believing it. Yes, I said. I want a wing where women like me, widows, teachers, those who have worked and have little left, can live without fear of being sold for convenience. Call it the Lillian Grace Wing. Call it whatever you like, but make it steady. Make it last. Her hands trembled when she took the papers I had brought. This will help hundreds, she whispered. This will change lives. I watched her read the clause that ensured the property funds would be used only for care, not for speculative ventures or to be siphoned away. Samuels had been careful. The gift was binding and absolute, with guardianship provisions that would make it legally difficult for anyone to appropriate the money. It was not revenge dressed as generosity. It was law and love braided together. Evelyn looked up. Why do this, Mrs. Grace? Why not keep the house as a memory? If they wanted the house for memory, I told her, they could have kept the memory alive without chasing its walls. They wanted ownership. I want use. I want to turn what they coveted into refuge. My voice was steady. If they plan to lock me in concrete, then I will build doors for others. She closed the folder gently and reached out to take my hand. You are giving this town a gift no one expected, she said. We will honor it with the care it deserves. Walking back to my car, the afternoon sky was a clean, bright blue. I felt the weight of the legal paper in my bag like the heft of a seed. It is an odd thing to watch people prepare to strip you of your life and to know you have arranged, in a quiet room across town, for that life to bloom for others. On the drive home, I passed the little park where children chased pigeons. One boy tripped, and a small woman helped him up, her laugh as bright as a bell. For a moment I wanted to stop the car and join them in their small, furious joy. Instead, I smiled at the rearview mirror and said to myself, let them celebrate their plan. We will have a different celebration when the time is right. They arrived that afternoon like a parade, bright clothes and brighter intentions, carrying casseroles and compliments the way one carries a wreath meant to hide whatever they are really bringing to the door. Amanda's smile was lacquered perfection. Greg's hand rested on her back with that quiet ownership he always favored. The decoy Samuels had mailed to them sat folded on the coffee table like a trophy. Amanda had read it twice already, eyes wide the second time as if the words had finally landed where she wanted them to. See? She told a cousin who had lingered by the fireplace. She finally understands. It is time. They spoke about nothing important: neighbors, the weather, who had the best lemon cake in town, but the undertow of conversation pulled toward the same shore: the house and what it would fund. Amanda told the assembled relatives with the kind of pleased cruelty that comes from thinking you have solved the last problem in your life. Once everything is signed, we will sell Grace Manor, she said. We will have capital. Greg will manage the sale. We will move south. She laughed, a tinkling sound that fit her white teeth and her plans. I sat at the head of the table, a cup of tea cooling untouched, watching them perform their good intentions. They did not see the way the house itself watched them back, the way the chandeliers seemed to tilt their tiny crystal heads. I had signed the decoy earlier, on Samuel's instruction, the signature deliberate but measured, the way an actress takes a bow before the final scene. They thought the stage belonged to them. Greg clinked his glass for attention. It will be a new beginning, he announced. We can manage everything from here. We will make sure she has what she needs. He smiled across at me, the kind of smile someone gives a clock. Reassuring, impersonal, and better when she is settled, we can handle the sale and not be rushed. You could hear the subtext in the pause that followed, the way it suggested we would profit in the meantime. Amanda's eyes shone. Mother, we have arranged everything with Sunny Garden private room, tailored care. You will have a garden view, and they even promised regular visits. It is wonderful. The relatives murmured approbation, and someone called Amanda a good daughter. I could feel the words like cold hands on my shoulders. They toasted to my new life, and glasses rose like little ships in a harbor, all stocked and ready to leave. Then someone turned the music up, the kind of thin, cheerful song that fills in corners so conversation can miss the sharp edges. They danced in small circles, laughing the way people laugh when they are not looking at the damage their feet are making. I retreated into the pocket of hush behind the hall, a quiet place one can only get to by letting people crash around you. Samuels had told me exactly how to play this. Let them believe the victory was theirs. Let them celebrate their expectation. They would never guess that expectation had been anticipated and arranged for. I stood at the top of the stairs, the wood cool under my palm, and watched them from above like a gentle kind of judge. I switched on my phone, more out of habit than need, opened the recorder, and let it sit in my palm like a small, waiting heart. The light on the phone's screen was a petty lamp in the large room. No one noticed. As the laughter diluted and the talk turned to upholstery and hypothetical buyers, Greg slid onto the arm of the settee beside Amanda, glass in hand, and said to her, in a voice I had heard 100 times and never liked, "Just think of the relief, Amanda. Imagine not worrying about her bills or her medical nonsense. It will be cleaner that way." He tipped his chin toward me, not unkindly, but with the sort of certainty that robs a room of its balance. Amanda nodded, face softened by drink and reassurance. "Yes," she said. "Imagine if she is gone sooner rather than later, that worry will be lifted." She said it as if speaking of paperwork, as if time could be so neatly arranged that the unpredictable was boxed into a calendar. Her words were bright and terrible. Greg chuckled between courses, his words falling like loose change. "Honestly," he said, staring at his plate, "I just hope she doesn't hang around too long. All these medical costs, appointments, it'd be easier if it ended quickly." The music seemed to stop breathing. Laughter froze. Even the woman serving pudding hesitated. I didn't move. I'd been waiting for this moment, the truth spoken aloud. My phone recorder, hidden beneath the napkin, caught every syllable, the plan, the wish for my absence, the cruelty wrapped in convenience. When the guests left and the night fell quiet, I walked to the hall table. The little red light blinked steady, proof that greed always betrays itself in time. I slipped the phone into a small envelope I had already prepared. On it, in firm capital letters, I wrote, "The will you never read." It wasn't triumph I felt, just a calm, precise kind of justice. The envelope went into the old desk drawer where Henry once kept his receipts. The sound of it closing was almost tender, like a curtain falling after the last act. They believed they had won. They believed the villa was theirs. But that night, the house had already changed hands in spirit, if not yet on paper. It belonged to something greater now, truth and the quiet patience of a woman who had learned how to wait. The waiting room smelled of old leather and lemon polish. I sat with my hands folded in my lap while Amanda crossed her legs and checked her phone twice, the kind of nervous habit that always looks like control. Greg leaned forward, palms flat on his knees, his jaw tight. When we were called, we walked into Samuels's office as if we were 3 people at a family reading one of those ceremonies where people hope, everybody leaves comforted. No one could have guessed how fast comfort can turn into a thin film covering something sharp beneath. Amanda smiled before she spoke. "We only need one signature," she said, as if the words themselves would finish the story. "You understand, Mother. Once you sign, the house is settled back into the family. We will take care of the sale, the costs, everything. You'll be comfortable." She pronounced comfortable like a charm that will close every worry. Samuel sat across from us like the man who opens a stage curtain. He folded his hands, then cleared his throat. "Mrs. Grace has already signed what she wanted," he said quietly. "Before we proceed, I would like to play a short video she left." His voice did not tremble. That steadiness was what had drawn me to him when Henry was alive. It is what people need when the world threatens to tilt. Amanda's smile faltered. Greg's hand went to his lap and clenched. "A video?" Amanda asked. "What is this, some theatrics?" "It is simply a message Mrs. Grace recorded for this moment," Samuel said. "If you will excuse me." He turned to a small screen in the corner of the room and pressed play. On the screen, my own face filled the frame, older, quieter, but present. I had recorded it a week earlier in my sitting room, sitting in the chair Henry used to favor. I had looked straight into the lens, because the camera listens the way people sometimes forget to. "If you are watching this," my voice said, "then I have done what I can do with my hands and my books and my years." I watched all of them harden at hearing my voice. Amanda's lips a thin line, Greg's face pale. I continued, because the recording carries courage, the live voice sometimes can't lift. "I have used the last of my clarity to make sure what I value outlives my name being used as a tool. You may think my age has dulled me, that I am a relic, that I do not see what is being planned." I paused, letting the sentence hang. "But I am not gone. Not yet. I am choosing where this house will belong when I am finished with it, and I want it to belong to people who will need it for shelter, not as a ledger entry." There was no drama added to the recording, no flourish, just the quiet of a woman saying plainly what she intended. Then the screen blacked for a second, and the audio file changed. It was the voice I had taped at the party, the careless, bright voice of Amanda, laughing, and Greg beside her. "I can't wait till she's gone," Amanda said on the recording, the words as easy as dessert. "Then we'll have the money, and I'll start the firm. Honestly, I'd build a pool on the lawn and call it a day. Old hag should die already." Greg's chuckle under the sentence sounded like a man checking the weather, indifferent and cold. The air in Samuel's office froze. Amanda's face changed color, not from anger at first, but from the knowledge that a performance had been made transparent. This is fake," she blurted. "Someone edited that. You spliced it together. You're a showman, Samuels." Samuels did not flinch. He reached to a small envelope on his desk and extracted a sealed certificate. He handed it to the paralegal at the table, who set it between us like a small, immovable fact. "We had Mrs. Grace's message time-stamped at the notary registry yesterday, and the digital file sent directly to a certified preservation service," Samuels said. "The party recording was made on Mrs. Grace's device and uploaded to a secure USB. We had a forensic copy made by an independent lab. There is a chain of custody and a hash certificate confirming the file's integrity. These are not tricks, this is evidence." Greg pushed away from the chair, standing as if to make distance from the words and the proof. "This is fraud," he stammered. "You cannot just play altered audio and expect." "You can contest it," Samuel said softly. "You can hire your experts. But the recording is a lawful, time-stamped file with a verified chain of custody. It is exactly what it appears to be. You planning to profit from someone you argued to commit to care." Amanda's voice rose. "You're ruining us. You have no right to—" Her words broke into a sharp animal sound that could not be patched with anger. Samuels closed a folder and opened a different one, this one thicker, with the wax seal that Henry had liked to collect. He read the formal words out loud with the gravity of someone reading scripture. "I, Lillian Grace," he began, "being of sound mind and memory, do hereby bequeath and convey all interest in properties held in my name, including but not limited to Grace Manor, to the Sunny Garden Foundation, to be used in perpetuity for the construction and maintenance of a residential facility for the elderly to be named the Lillian Grace Wing." He read the clauses: my intention to restrict use, the prohibition on sale for private gain, the trusteeship clause that required a panel to oversee expenditures. He read the legal instrument that would convert what they believed was to be an inheritance into community shelter. Amanda's reaction came like a storm. "You are destroying my life," she shouted. "You promised this was supposed to be mine." Her hands trembled now, not from scandal but from something like grief that is also embarrassment. "How could you—" "Because you were prepared to treat my life as a line item," I said, my voice steady, the calm that had been practiced in the quiet hours. "You called me old to justify your theft. You made me smaller so you could stand taller. I prefer to stand with others." There was a soft pounding at the door, appropriate, discreet, the sound of law arriving in its simple form. Samuels had done everything properly. He had not called the police on impulse, but on procedure. The officer who stepped in bore the look of a man who had done this kind of cruelty in small town after small town. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, nodding toward Greg, "we have received complaints filed regarding attempted financial exploitation and questions about forged or coerced signatures. We'd like to ask you a few questions." His eyes flicked toward Amanda, then rested on the forensic certificate. There was a pause, like a held-in breath. Greg's mouth worked. He swore under his breath, then muttered, "She's insane," the old contempt surfacing as a reflex. "This is a trap." He lifted his chin, as if to make himself tall. Samuels's reply was precise and quiet. "She is not insane, Greg." She prepared. She acted with counsel, with notarized documents, with evidence. You are the one whose plans were spoken aloud in a room full of people and preserved by technology. The officers moved with the kind of professional calm that is easy to mistake for cruelty when you stand on the other side of it. They explained the charges as you might read a notice. There would be an investigation. For now they needed to ensure signatures and documents were authenticated. Greg tried to step forward, to protest, but one of the officers placed a hand on his shoulder. He looked at Amanda, at me, at Samuels, and for a moment I saw in his face the ugly clarity of a man realizing the scaffolding so carefully built around his life was being taken away. They asked Greg to come with them to answer questions. Amanda's cries filled the room, high-pitched and full of accusation. "You're being cruel," she said to me. "You could have given us time." Her voice sobbed then, and something like the old raw daughter returned for a tremulous second. But she swallowed it. "You ruined everything," she spat. I looked at her and saw, not just the woman I had raised, but the girl who had learned to read humiliation as truth. "I did not ruin anything," I told her. "I simply redirected what you wanted to use. You turned a home into a commodity. I turned it into a refuge. I did not relish their pain. I had no wish to punish them beyond the necessary repair of what they would have taken. But I needed justice to be less noisy than revenge." They led Greg away. Amanda's knees buckled. Samuels moved to steady her. The office was a sudden garden of whispers. The paralegal made phone calls. The officers took statements. The forensic lab on Samuels's desk hummed like a small, diligent engine. I felt neither triumph nor glee. I felt the slow, cool satisfaction of things arranged as they should be. Before they closed the door behind the officers, Greg managed a last bitter whisper aimed at me. "You crazy old woman," he mouthed. "You'll regret this." The handcuffs clicked like a metronome marking the end of one kind of music and the beginning of another. Samuels placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. "You did well," he said. "You did what you had to." The words were simple, and they felt true. I rose and smoothed my skirt like a woman who had tidied a table at the end of a long meal, then folded my hands and let the quiet that followed settle over us. Outside, the day continued. Indifferent cars passed, a dog barked, a courier delivered packages. The small-town life kept its rhythm, but inside that office, the rhythm had changed. I had planned, yes, I had also listened. The proof lay on the desk, a video, a recording, a will that refused to be rewritten by greed. When the officers had gone and the papers were signed, I took a breath the way a swimmer exhales when rising to the surface. I had not wanted a spectacle. I had wanted the truth in a room where truth could be measured. It had been done. The will would stand. The recordings would stand. The rest would be a matter for the courts and for time. Amanda sat, hands clasped, as if trying to hold herself small enough to vanish. I crossed the room and pressed a cool hand to her cheek. She flinched at first, then did not pull away. "I am not your enemy, child," I told her, voice so low only she could hear. "I am the person who refused to let a house become a safe for your ambition." She looked at me, the anger around her eyes brittle and real. "You'll never understand what you took," she whispered. "What I took," I said, "was the right to be used." The headline ran in the morning edition, like a whisper turned into a verdict. "Daughter charged with attempted exploitation of elderly mother." Beneath it, the photograph captured Amanda stepping out of the courthouse, her face half hidden behind dark glasses, the once gleaming confidence gone dull. The papers liked the symmetry of it, a well-known family name, a scandal wrapped in wealth and betrayal. To them, it was a story. To me, it was closure. By midweek, the radio stations joined in. The Grace case, they called it, because people love to turn other people's pain into something easy to repeat. Grace family heiress accused of conspiring with husband to defraud mother of family estate. The hosts debated whether greed was inherited or learned. I listened once, for curiosity's sake, then turned it off. I had already lived the story. I didn't need to hear it narrated back to me by strangers. Amanda lost her position within days. The firm that had once showcased her in glossy brochures now issued a statement about moral integrity and temporary suspension pending investigation. Greg fared worse. His accounting license was revoked after a review uncovered irregularities. When the professional boards move, they move quietly but thoroughly, like surgeons. The same men who had toasted Greg at country clubs now crossed the street when they saw him coming. Neighbors who had once envied the Grace family mansion now whispered at the farmer's market. "She used to boast about the lineage," one said near the tomatoes. "Now she won't even look up from the ground." I didn't correct them. I no longer lived there to hear it directly, and rumor has its own justice. Meanwhile, the place that had once been the house became something else entirely. The Sunny Garden Foundation worked faster than I had dared hope. The construction crews moved through the old rooms like careful archaeologists, preserving the marble floor, restoring the columns, turning parlors into sunlit lounges, and the east bedrooms into airy dormitories. The day of the dedication arrived clear and bright, as if the sky itself had decided to make amends for all the gray years. I stood outside the renovated building, the banner fluttering above the entrance. The Lillian Grace Wing. The letters gleamed in brass against the white stone, firm and quiet. People gathered: reporters, donors, nurses in soft green uniforms, and a few residents from Sunny Garden who had walked with their canes to witness it. Evelyn Marsh, the director, stood beside me with tears she didn't bother to hide. When they handed me the scissors to cut the ribbon, my hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the strange strength that comes when something you imagined becomes solid. The blades sliced through the satin, and the crowd broke into applause. Flashbulbs flickered. I smiled, not the polite smile of survival, but something freer, lighter. "They wanted to lock me behind four walls," I said into the microphone. My voice echoed against the courtyard stones. "So I built 4 doors instead, and I left them open for anyone who needs to walk through." The words hung in the air for a moment, and I saw Evelyn's hand move to her heart. Behind her, a nurse pushed a wheelchair forward so an old man could see the plaque up close. I caught sight of his expression, gentle awe, as if he had just discovered proof that the world occasionally gets something right. The plaque itself was simple: the Lillian Grace Wing, dedicated to restoring dignity, one life at a time. Beneath it, the metal gleamed like a mirror, and for a second I saw my reflection, smaller but steadier than the woman who had once feared losing everything. A young journalist approached after the ceremony, her press badge swinging on a thin blue lanyard. "Mrs. Grace," she said softly, holding out a recorder, "may I ask you something personal?" I nodded. "Do you ever regret it? Losing the house, your daughter, all of that?" I looked past her at the building at the windows, alive with the sound of new voices, at the garden where sunlight spilled across the path. "Regret?" I repeated, testing the word on my tongue. "No, I didn't lose anything. I traded a house for peace of mind, and I've learned peace has a higher market value than inheritance ever will." She smiled, perhaps not understanding but respecting the certainty in my tone. The next morning, her article appeared online. "From betrayal to benevolence, the woman who turned her family's greed into hope." For once, the headline got it right. That evening, I walked through the newly furnished hallways. Each room carried a small brass plate with donors' names, but on every door hung a hand-painted flower made by the residents who now called this place home. The air smelled faintly of lavender and new wood. From somewhere down the corridor came the sound of piano keys, hesitant at first, then stronger. Someone was playing an old hymn, the kind Henry used to hum under his breath while working late. I paused outside one of the open rooms. Inside, a woman about my age was unpacking a small box, setting down framed photographs one by one. She looked up when she saw me. "You must be Mrs. Grace," she said, her smile timid but kind. "They told me you made this place possible." I nodded. "Welcome home," I said simply. She started to cry, not loudly, just soft tears of relief that fall when someone realizes they are safe. I stepped forward, touched her shoulder gently, and together we finished arranging her photographs. Outside, the last of the afternoon sun slid across the brass letters on the plaque. For the first time in decades, the house felt alive again, not because it was filled with possessions or ambition, but because it was filled with people who had been forgotten elsewhere. As I left, Evelyn caught my arm. "You've done something extraordinary," she whispered. "Most people only dream of leaving a legacy. You built one out of broken pieces." I smiled. Sometimes the broken pieces are all we have, I said. The trick is learning how to make them shine. When I stepped outside, the breeze carried the faint scent of magnolia from the trees that Henry had planted long ago. For years I had thought those trees belonged to the past. Now I saw them for what they were, roots that had simply been waiting for the right season. The press would move on to another story, the neighbors would find new gossip, and Amanda would learn perhaps too late that wealth without conscience is a house without walls. But the Lillian Grace wing would stand. It would outlive the scandal, outlive me. And every morning, when the sun rose over its windows, I hoped someone inside would feel what I finally felt. The quiet, unshakable peace of belonging somewhere by choice, not by permission. A year later, I no longer lived in mansions or under chandeliers. My home was a small, sunlit room at the far end of the Grace Wing, the building that once carried my family name like a burden and now bore it as a promise. The walls were pale yellow, the curtains soft white, and every morning the light arrived like an old friend who never knocked. I spent my days quietly reading to the residents, tending to the small herb garden near the west window, and listening to the piano that someone played every afternoon at 4. The world outside went on without me. Scandals faded, newspapers moved on, and the name Grace became something gentler, something that meant care instead of control. One afternoon, there was a soft knock on my door. When I turned, I saw a young nurse in a crisp uniform standing shyly by the frame. Her badge read Ellie Johnson. She carried a small bouquet of wild daisies and a hesitant smile. "Mrs. Grace?" she asked. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," I said, setting my book aside. "Come in, dear." She stepped closer, holding out the flowers. "These are for you. I wanted to thank you." Her voice trembled slightly. "I'm one of the students from the Grace Fund scholarship. If it weren't for you, I would have never been able to finish nursing school." I thought about quitting so many times, but then I'd see the plaque with your name on it and remember why I started. I smiled, feeling the warmth of something larger than pride. "There's no need to thank me, Ellie. Just promise me you'll do the same for someone else one day." She nodded, her eyes shining. "I already started. I'm helping a single mother in my neighborhood apply for the scholarship this year." She laughed softly. "Guess it's contagious." "Good," I said, and my heart felt lighter. Let kindness be the only inheritance that grows interest. After she left, I poured myself a cup of tea and watched the sunlight crawl across the wooden floor. The air smelled faintly of chamomile. It was then that I noticed a small brown parcel resting on my bedside table. There was no return address, just my name written in handwriting I hadn't seen in a long time. My hands hesitated before unwrapping it. Inside was a folded letter on plain paper, written in ink that had smudged at the edges as if by nervous fingers. "Today I helped an old woman write her will," the letter began. "She was scared that her children would steal from her the way I once tried to steal from you. While I held her hand, I understood. I finally understood what you were protecting. I'm not asking for forgiveness, because I don't deserve it yet. But I wanted you to know. I understand now, Mother." No signature, but she didn't need to sign it. I would have known Amanda's handwriting anywhere, the looping A's, the slight slant to the right. My eyes stayed on the words until they blurred, not from sadness but from the strange relief of recognition. There are apologies that arrive late, and yet they still manage to heal something you thought was long dead. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my journal between 2 pressed magnolia petals, flowers that once grew outside the house that had started it all. Then I walked to the window. Outside, the evening sun spilled gold across the courtyard, catching the bronze letters of the plaque that bore my name. The Lillian Grace Wing. I whispered softly, almost to myself. They wanted to take my house. I let them have everything except what they could never steal. My dignity. The words didn't carry bitterness anymore. They carried peace. For the first time in many years, I wasn't fighting anyone. I was simply living, breathing, being. Amanda had her understanding, Greg had his justice, and I finally had my quiet. I returned to my chair, poured a second cup of tea, and watched as the sun lowered beyond the garden wall. Its light touched everything gently, the plants, the nurses crossing the courtyard, the rows of open windows filled with laughter. The world felt large again, full of possibility. As the warmth reached my hands, I smiled not with triumph, but with the calm joy of a woman who had already won in the only way that mattered. The teacup clinked softly against its saucer. Outside, the light shifted from gold to rose, painting the plaque with one last glow before dusk. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt entirely at home. And that was my story. Not just about betrayal or even justice, but about dignity. Because sometimes we don't win by fighting louder. We win by standing so still, so certain, that the noise simply falls away. If you believe every woman deserves to be heard, every elder deserves respect, then stay with me. Hit subscribe to Grandma True Stories so we can keep sharing these stories of courage, justice, and the kind of strength that doesn't fade with age. Thank you for listening, my dear. Until next time, this is Grandma reminding you, dignity never grows old.